Welcome to the Divorce Survival Guide podcast, where we have open and honest conversations about co-parenting, separation, divorce, and the hardest question of all, should you stay or should you go? I'm Kate Anthony, your divorce survival guide, and I'm here to help you navigate some of the roughest waters you've ever swum in and answer some of your toughest questions. I've been to hell and back, and now it's my mission in life to help you get to the other side of this process with your sanity and your heart intact. Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm excited to bring you this first episode of 2025. Holy moly. Today I have with me my dear friend, Andrea Owen, back on the show. It's been a minute, and we are having a great conversation about her divorce and the re-release of her best-selling book, 52 Ways to Live a Kick-Ass Life, which has been updated and is an amazing, great book. And this is Andrea's second divorce. So she's offering us some insights into what's different, what's the same, and all the lessons that she has learned. Before I bring you to the episode, I want to remind you that we have coming up at the end of April, the Unbreakable Retreat in Sedona, Arizona. So head on over to the show notes or to my website, kateanthony.com/unbreakable to learn all the details and sign up to join us. And here's Andrea. Andrea, thank you so much for coming back on the show. It's been a while.
It has been a while. You've been on my show many times, us laughing and, being our wise selves.
I'm excited about this conversation for a number of reasons. First and foremost, because we get to talk.
Yes.
Which we do anyway. But there's a couple of things happening in your life right now. One of which is that your first book, 52 Ways to Live a Kick-Ass Life, is being re-released. I know.
The title just tells you everything about when that came out, everyone.
Exactly. I was thinking about that too. I was like, so 52 Ways to Live a Kick-Ass Life, BS-free wisdom to ignite your inner badass and live the life you deserve. This book has been translated into how many languages?
That one's only been translated into, I believe, 3. It's my second book that's been translated into 20.
Right. Okay. This was written in 2012 and it is being re-released this year in December of 2024. So
updated and revised. They're not just like slapping a new cover on it. And yeah, I wouldn't be okay with that. It needed to be updated.
Speaking of the update, so the other thing that's going on in your life is that you are getting divorced now for the second time.
Yes.
This book, at least the first version, starts off with an anecdote about starting off your first divorce.
Yes.
So there's like a full circle moment here.
In more ways than one. Yes. Life is hilarious like that. Yeah.
Thanks, universe.
100%. Yeah.
And one of the things you say in the beginning of the first version anyway, and I don't know if this is different in the revised version, but you really talk about how there was this moment that happened and you realized, as you say in the book, the world took me by the shoulders and shook the shit out of me, told me to wake the hell up. And then you go on to say, I had spent our entire relationship, all 13 years, suffocating myself, building a life around someone else because I was simply desperate for love. Was it his fault? No. I had to take responsibility for the life I had 100% participated in creating. So I'm wondering if in going through this second divorce and this reprinting of this book, what has changed? How has this time been different?
And what has stayed the same?
And what has stayed the same?
We like to learn lessons the hard way on repeat.
Right, right, right.
Sorry to
If at
interrupt you.
first,
Yeah.
if no, if at first we don't learn it, try and try again,
Hmm.
universe.
Hmm.
So yeah.
So what's different and what stayed the same? I'll start with the bad news first. Like what stayed the same? And it's interesting. It's always interesting to have someone else read your work back to you
Mm.
because it's like, oh, okay. I recommend everyone do it, whether you're a writer or a poet or just narrating your journals or whatever it is. The thing that I did the same the second time was I think that one of the things I did different was that I started to decenter a husband in my
Mm.
life. Like I saw that that was a mistake and I'm like I need to live my own life and be clear on what it is that I want and need. The part that I did the same the second time versus the first time was that I didn't do everything I could to make sure that I got what I wanted and needed
In the relationship.
in the relationship. Like I to be
Hmm.
fair,
Hmm.
I think it was a progression. There's a divorce attorney that I follow online and people ask him all the time, how do marriages fall apart? And he said, very slowly over time and then all at once. And
Yeah.
that's exactly what happened in both of my marriages. And so the very slowly part, the second time around, how it was similar to the first, is I hung on to hope. And I think that that is the eternal optimist in me. And I don't hate that about myself. Like I love that I will eternally be optimistic and hope for the best and look for the best in people and look for the best in situations. And where it can bite me in the ass is when I'm not listening to my gut. One of the things that I did the same negative behavior in both marriages was didn't listen to my intuition. The second time I just thought it was trauma. I was
Mm.
like, this is my trauma from my first marriage. This is my abandonment issues, blah, blah, blah. And I discounted it until my body caught up with me and I got sick, which we can talk about that later. But yeah, those are just
Yep.
kind of a sprinkling, a smattering, if you will, of things I did different, things I did the same.
Well, I'm just actually want to dive into that a little bit more. The way that we talk ourselves out of the very real feelings that we're having. Our intuition, it's very clear what is, well, it's not clear, right? There's something screaming at us,
Hmm.
and we can't we are so fast, especially I think in our culture where we're like, oh, well, what's my part? Oh, well, let
Yeah.
me look at my stuff. Let me go to therapy. I'll work my stuff out, right? We'll make it ourselves and our problems so much more profoundly, right?
Hmm.
Until we're like, oh, wait, it has actually nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
Actually, that wasn't my trauma. That was a mismatch.
Right.
So I just kind of want to hear your thoughts more on that about you
Yeah.
thinking that it was your trauma when it was really the relationship and a mismatch
Because
in
I
many
think it
ways.
was, at the end of the day, I think it was both. I think both were speaking. And I work in personal growth, and I still couldn't decipher between those two. It took me a long time. And yeah, I just want to reiterate that it's both. And I think culturally too, there's still so much shame around having multiple divorces, like
Hmm.
having one, we call it a quote unquote failed marriage. Like I don't look at it that way. I look
Hmm.
at having a 16-year relationship with someone and raising two wonderful children and building, like, we had a beautiful life. Like we had
Yeah.
some really great moments. I think it is a huge success what we had. And so just culturally, there's still stigma around that of having like multiple failed marriages. And also, I loved this person. I really
Hmm.
truly did. I
Hmm.
wanted it to work. I
Hmm.
wanted us to do whatever we could to make it work. And then the third point that I'll make is, yeah, I think that so often, especially on social media, especially in movies and TV, we hear about these just egregiously bad relationships and
Right.
marriages,
Hmm.
they're abusive, whether it's financially, physically, mentally, emotionally. There's gaslighting going on. And I've been in that situation in my first marriage, but in my second one, it wasn't. It was truly a case of not bad enough to leave, but not good enough to stay.
Hmm.
And there's shame in walking away from that too. It's like he's a good man, Savannah. Like we
Hmm.
we're taught to accept crumbs and be happy with that.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. And this is, and I never want to come at this from a place of that my soon to be ex-husband was a bad person. Like he's genuinely not. He's just
Hmm.
a bad match for me.
That's
And
right.
I feel like that maybe doesn't get talked about enough. And
Hmm.
I think that a lot of people are staying in marriages where that's the case. And I want to say this last thing. I cannot tell you how many women have come to me like when they find out I left my marriage, whether it's a former client or a current client or a colleague, and they'll casually say, "How did you know it was time to go?"
Every time, all the
And
time.
I want to say, and I don't
Hmm.
say this, I think I'm going to start saying it. If you're asking me that question,
Hmm.
and I don't want to get into your business, but if you're asking me that question, it's probably time for you to go.
And it's time for you to call Kate. that's that's the answer.
KateAnthony.com.
Kate Anthony literally wrote a book
Answering that question.
answering that question. Yeah, I mean, the intro to my book, I talk all about how I was asking that question to everyone I knew who was divorced. How do you know?
Were
How do you
you?
know? Uh-huh.
I don't
And
think I
they
ever
say,
asked it. I think because I already knew.
mm,
Like,
you sure didn't ask me.
I didn't. I didn't
You
ask
sure
any of
didn't
my
ask me.
friends.
No. No, it was, I was asking and asking. And then the only person who answered it was my friend. He said, he was like, when you know, you'll know. And I was like, motherfucker, the point is that I don't know.
I need a yes or no.
I need
Check the
a,
box.
here's how you know. But,
Yeah.
you know, he was right that when I knew,
Yeah.
I knew. It was very clear. And it was like for me, it was like like my frying pan moment. Like I
Yeah.
got hit upside the head with a frying pan. And the reason I do what I do is to help women not have to wait for that moment, not like sit there waiting for a frying pan to hit them upside the head. Like
Yeah.
there are
I had the
actually,
frying pan moment.
yeah. What was yours? Are you
The
allowed
first
to
time or the
say?
second time?
The second time.
The second time was an argument that happened, and we'd been in counseling for many, many months, committed,
Hmm.
both of us every other week, consistently, months. And we had an argument and which was rare for us, which what transpired and what was said to me became so clear
Mm.
of like, okay, there's my answer. And it
Hmm.
was just it was a fundamental difference in values that came, which I kind of knew, but it like really, really got clear. And so, yeah, then I had the very hard conversation, with him, which was excruciating.
So one of the things that happened for you, or what I observed, right, is that the person that you were married to is not necessarily the same person that you're divorcing.
Hmm.
Can you talk about that a little
Yeah.
bit? I know that there are areas that you want to be cautious about, and I want to respect all the
Yeah.
boundaries.
For
So,
legal reasons,
yeah.
this could be my first marriage or my second marriage that I'm talking about. But yeah, I think that what ends up happening, and I was unaware of this beforehand, and it took me experiencing it and being so lost as how to handle what was in front of me that I reached out to you, and I'm like, what the fuck is going on? And
Hmm. Hmm.
you told me about this, and what I experienced, again, this could be my first ex-husband or my second ex-husband, was that any issues that the two of you had in your marriage, whether it was personality stuff that you didn't love, coping skills that you didn't love, ways of communicating that you didn't love, those are exasperated 100-fold. Probably me too. Like I wasn't behaving
Yeah.
as my best self either at moments. Like, Jesus, I wouldn't have wanted to deal with me either. This is, you get really smacked in the face with the term emotions run high.
Hmm.
This is what people are talking about. I noticed this too
Right.
when my dad died in 2016, of like people just
Hmm.
kind of like not behaving well.
Mm.
And again, with in both of my divorces, is that it's like almost a 180, and you're like, who are you?
Right.
And it was incredibly difficult to contend with, because in most cases, the person that you're having this conflict with, this contentious thing with, is the person you would go to be your source of support. They're
Right.
your confidant. They're like, and
Yeah.
many times our spouses are our best friends. And the person that is causing you the most harm is the person that you can't go to for help. And so it's just this almost this betrayal, this it feels like you're in a foreign land speaking a foreign language and you have no control. And it's the fear I was experiencing was those acute weeks, maybe months, was unlike anything I had experienced before. I went into the darkest place I had been in
Yeah.
maybe in my entire life. I was hanging by a lifeline. I don't wish that on anyone. I actually got a book idea during that time, and I'm like, I need to write a book about the depths of despair, and I need to remember this place. Because I'll tell you what, at the end of the day, this was my least favorite time of the day. At the end of the day, when it's 10, 11 o'clock at night, and you know you have to put your phone down to try to go to sleep, that was I fucking hated that hour of like setting it down and setting my head down on the pillow and being alone with my fear, with my emotional terror was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. I experienced it in both of my divorces. But it's those moments that like I just want to acknowledge for anyone listening who's in it right now.
Yeah.
The thing that I kept reaching out to my friend, you were one of them. I'm like, please just remind me that this is temporary, because I was terrified that I was going to be stuck in that purgatory forever.
You did. You were really good about in this time. You were really good about reaching out and saying exactly what you needed, which was something that I think this is a testament to all the work that you've done. And I think it's part of how you work with women and what you write about, right? Identifying a need and then speaking it and saying it. You know, you've always been good at this, right? You'll leave a message, a Voxer, and say, I just need you to hear this and I don't need you to respond. Or
I would say, I need somewhere to put this, because it was all my feelings and all my fears.
And then you would say, or I need you to tell me that this is temporary. I need, right. And I would, so I would know where to go. I would be like, oh no, this is totally temporary. And then I could expand on that for you. And you know what? I see this all the time. And here's what's on the other side of it. And don't worry. I promise I've got you. We'll get you through it, or whatever. You know, I hope it was helpful.
Well, I want to pause you for a second. And you did not ask me to do this. Like, you did not ask me to come onto your podcast and turn it into an infomercial. But I am I don't know. I mean, I would have gotten through it without you. I'm not going to be like, I never would have been able to get through it. I would have, but I would have crashed and fucking burned. Even just hearing your voice now, like, brings me back to that, and just hearing how matter of fact you were about everything. Like, I trusted you implicitly, not only the advice you were giving me about like what to ask my lawyer, about how to respond to my soon to be ex-husband, about how to handle this with my children. All of that was, of course, like invaluable. But just the matter of fact way that you said it was like, oh, she knows what she's talking about. Like, and even when, you know, because I am in a different state that you are, you know, sometimes you'd be like, well, it depends on your state. Go and find out. I was like, how lucky did I get to have like such a dear friend who's like an expert at this, who's like holding my hand through it. And so if anyone's out there listening on the fence about, I don't even know what your programs are, but hire Kate. Okay. I will tell you, I'm lucky and I got it for free because she's my friend. But I mean, I just want to thank you so much. Like,
I love you.
It was the most terrorizing few months of my life.
Yeah.
And I'm not on the other side yet completely, but I'm through, I think, the worst of it. And now have better skills to be able to handle what is right in front of my face over the next few months as I process down to having a finalized divorce.
Yeah. Which, oh my God, we're going to have a party for that.
It's going to be right around my 50th birthday, by the way. So there's that.
I always forget you're so much younger than I am. Damn it. Baby. Andrea, when you talk about that terror, you are often one of the people that I think you always have, I make up anyway, that, and I don't know why, by the way, because I tend to dissociate when I'm having like really big feelings, like that's my coping mechanism. When you talk about your big feelings and like the terror and I'm like, oh, wow, that's really cool.
Yeah.
She gets to feel that stuff.
I do. I know.
But what was the terror? Like, what were you, like, if you could name the feelings or name the
Yeah.
fears, like, what were you
Mhm.
actually afraid of in those moments?
I think anytime you're dealing with, again, like, in both of my divorces, like someone who you had relied upon for so long to, we, even when things aren't great, they become consistent. It's like,
Right.
even in the not great
Yes.
moments, they become consistent and you can
Hmm.
more or less predict your partner.
Hmm.
I think for me, the fear came from the unpredictability of it, of just,
Yes.
I don't know what I'm going to get when I
Right.
open this email or I answer this phone call or I have this conversation.
I don't know who this
And
person is anymore.
yeah, and
Hmm.
it felt like an attack on my nervous system.
It was actually
That's what
legitimately.
the
Hmm.
emotional terror was,
Hmm.
of not being able to, my nervous system not being able to predict what was next. So this
Right.
bled into, what is this going to look like for my children? What is this going to look like for my financial future? What is this going to look like for where I'm going to live? Like nothing was certain at
Right.
all.
Yeah.
And
Right.
then I was like, what the fuck have I done? Like, I wanted this. Like,
Yeah.
did I just make the biggest mistake of my life? And I would think back and I'm like, my life was so easy when I was married. Like,
Hmm.
what am
Hmm.
I doing? So it's just, and then just panic, panic, panic everywhere. Like, I have anxiety. So it just went
Right.
through the roof and I was unwell. So that
Hmm.
was what the emotional terror was. And I don't drink anymore.
Right.
So I have to rely on like breathing, like
Ew.
like drinking water and going on walks. I
So
went on so many
annoying.
fucking walks. Like, I was walking my dog twice a day in the morning and at night. And I would just like walk, walk, walk. Just like leave my friend messages, listen to their message, like catch up on correspondence, listen to music. Just I was listening to Esther Hicks
Oh no.
lectures. Oh,
Really?
I was like grabbing at everything. Like it's like law, but it helps.
Wow.
I'm like, whatever
Yeah.
works, whatever works. And it was just like listening to Esther Hicks, like talk just over and over again, like do her affirmations about the universe and like things are always working out for me. And I was like, I was desperate. So I went for what I knew had worked in another lifetime for me
Hmm.
15, 20 years earlier. And
Hmm.
it just was, I always tell people this, like there are times in your life, divorce can be one of them, where someone's saying one day at a time, which is a big expression in 12-step programs, which you and I are both very familiar with, when one day at a time feels like absolutely not. Like that is too hard. I had to do
Yeah.
1 minute at a time, like one
Yep.
hour at a time, like just get me to 4 o'clock, just get me to 5 o'clock, and just keep putting one foot. There was a point where I was doing like mechanical eating, like I could not eat, and I just would
Mm.
make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and just put it in a Ziploc baggie, and then just like break off pieces of it and eat it because I was dropping weight. I mean, this was just like a handful of weeks where that was happening when it was really bad, but it was like it was my nervous system. The
Yeah.
motherboard got fried.
It really did. And then at the same time, you're dealing with, teenagers who are having their own
Right.
massive experiences around this. And it was a really rough time for you. It was
Yeah.
really hard. Yeah, not gonna lie. It was hard. I was thinking as you were talking about how, you are the author of 52 Ways to Live a Kick-Ass Life, among other things, how to stop feeling
Mhm.
like shit.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And yet here we are, right? Like life still happens.
Still feel like
And
shit
that
sometimes. It
we
doesn't kick
still,
ass.
right, right? Life, like living a kick ass life, and then we're fucking not.
Yeah, right.
And
Mhm.
right. And how to stop
Yes.
feeling like shit. And then I feel like shit. What we know as the professionals that we are with all the training that we have and blah, 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 is that this is temporary, that I
Yep.
will get through this. I actually have the tools and the skills. I know how to breathe. I know how to go for walks. I know how to calm my central nervous system. I do know how to feel my feelings, by the way. I don't
Yeah.
fully dissociate, but that's just my go-to. And then I'm like, oh, I guess I'm having feelings. Fuck. Um,
Damn
now let me
it.
go back and figure out what those are.
Yeah.
That life still happens to those of us who are, professionals in this and whatever, but we have these tools. And you have 52 of
I
them in this
know.
book. How does the second version differ from the first version?
Well, look at that pretty lady with silver hair on the cover, first of all. We
Okay,
were
so
joking before you started recording about the difference in the pictures. Taken 14 years apart?
taken 14 years apart. So because we don't show the video to anybody, in the first on the cover of the first version, which is hot pink,
Hot pink.
Andrea is very blonde and very sort of fresh and rosy faced. And she, at the time, lived in Utah and looks like it. And in the second version,
I look like a woman who lives in Utah but is really trying to cling to her Southern California roots.
you're right, this is true. And then in the second version, if you don't follow Andrea on social media, which you totally should, Andrea embraced her gray in 2020,
2021?
2021.
Yeah.
And literally, she's like basically one of those poster children for like how fucking hot you can be with gray hair.
Remember, you did not want me to grow it out. You were like, I thought you were as vain as I was. Don't do it. I'm like, I am.
I'm gonna be gorgeous.
I think it might look
okay. And she's right. It looks fucking amazing. So the second version of this book has this gray-haired silver fox lady with a lot of more wisdom under her belt.
And a lot more. God, yeah. And that's why I wanted to update the book, is like we learn. Like I'm glad that, and I was on your show a long time ago talking about my first divorce, and that one was very different because we did not have children together. We didn't have kids. We didn't even have any assets. Like we hadn't bought a house yet and all these things. So it was easier logistically. Emotionally, it was dramatic and traumatic for me. I'm so glad that this time around I had the tools, as I'm financially, in bed with this person. I don't know how else to put it. We have 2 children together and all of the things that I think a lot of your listeners experience when they're getting divorced. And I'm so glad that, it's been many, many years and I have the wisdom and tools and strategies and friends and support to help me go through it. And I want to offer that up to anybody listening, is that leaning on people who have been through it. I mean, even if there's somebody out there who might be like a coworker or someone that you're not super close to, but who's been through it, take a risk and ask them, if you can have a conversation with them, or just like do what you can to sort of nurture the friendship, and you can be transparent and say like, I don't have anybody in my life that's been through this. And I'm really would love if I could lean on you for some support during this. Would that work for you? It's a risk. And I know it takes a lot of courage to do that, or even joining communities like yours. It's just, there's something to be said about the magic and power of women coming together, especially when they have a shared experience. Even if it's not to offer wisdom and advice, if it's just to say like, I get it, because it's such a common experience, with the amount of marriages that don't end up working out, but it also can feel very isolating. Like when it happens, like the loneliness is crippling. And it's like, how can there be no one else? It's just, I think it's one of those things that people like to keep private, and that's obviously their right to do that. But my God, it like we need each other in times like this.
We really do. And thank you for doing an infomercial for my group program, Phoenix Rising. I really appreciate that.
I don't even know what it's called or anything. I'm like,
it's literally why I created Phoenix Rising, everybody. But I think you make a really good point about friendships and about the fact that very often the people who are and have been your people, like your ex-husband for one, but also other friends, it's very surprising. And I've talked about this a lot on the show, and I think people have heard me talk about this before. It's very surprising when the people who you thought would be in your corner are not.
Devastating.
It's devastating. And did you experience that?
100%. I think that one of the most soul-crushing parts of that, I had a couple people who sort of exited stage left, and I'm making this up, but it feels like, I can only tell you what it feels like from my perspective. It feels like their love and support was conditional.
Yeah.
And I made up a story. Again, I still don't know if this is true, but I make up a story that, because I didn't behave I didn't make decisions based on how you think that I should have, or how you think that you would have if you were in my shoes, which nobody knows that you can't support me in this. And that was devastating.
It is really devastating. And I like how you put that first of all, that it feels like the love is conditional.
And I never knew it.
Right. All those years of investing. And it's like, oh, weird. But the other piece of that is that you didn't behave in the way that that they approved of. Right.
Exactly.
And one of the things that I want to say is that most of us behave really terribly during this time.
Poorly.
Really, really terribly. Some of the decisions that I made during my divorce, I look back and I'm like, girl, and I know there were some things that, and I would say to you, okay, that's
Yes.
a choice.
I think you even said like you are in a place right now where you're losing your mind.
I did. What I think the words that I used is that you can consider yourself certifiably insane, which is what my therapist said to me. You can consider your behaviors right now to be that of like possibly an insane person. And so your choices may not be all that trustworthy, which is, and it can be hard for friends to stand by and watch and support that. But also, it is our job as friends, and anyone who's been through it will know. Anyone who's been through it will be like, oh yeah, they're just going through that thing where they're crazy for a minute and they're making bad decisions, and they're going to get back on track because I know that she has the skills and the support. And my job as a friend is to go, okay, I can't condone that, but also I'm interested in the juicy gossip.
Sure, give me the tea.
Give me the tea. Give me all of the details. And also, this is really not good for you, right? Okay, good. Cool. Right? And it's a hard one. But for people who have never been through it, and I'm not saying that the people that you're talking about necessarily were bailing because you were doing crazy shit, but there's this sort of weird, wonky balance happening.
Yeah.
And also, there are people who just don't want to stand by and watch you go through this because it's emotional heavy lifting to be a friend of someone who's going through divorce.
It is. And I think too, like it's a myriad of reasons. I think we would be remiss if we didn't mention that many times friendships are put into question because there's two people involved and they don't know if they should stay loyal to the other person. And then sometimes they're having conversations with the other person and then they wedge themselves in the middle. And then it just becomes a big old mess. That can happen. Wink, wink. And it's messy. I think at the end of the day, it's just messy. But I also think that grace is our ally in these situations. And it's a combination of like, have boundaries and you get to decide what you will tolerate and you won't tolerate, whether you're the friend trying to support or whether you're the person going through the divorce. Have boundaries, but also exactly what you were saying, like have some grace for the people involved. Like they're not going to be behaving like their usual self. They're going through like top 5 most trying, difficult times of their entire life. God, if we live 80 years and we have only like, count on one hand how many times that we'll have a moment like that, give somebody some motherfucking grace.
That's right. That's right. And I think the other piece of this is very often the same part of us that chose the partner that we're leaving, if we're the ones that are leaving, often chose those friendships. And if we're wrapping one thing up, it might actually also be time to wrap the other thing up, right? I am no longer the person who continues to engage in this kind of relationship, whether it's my marriage or my friendship. And that can be a really big apple cart shaker.
And sometimes these are family members, everybody.
Very often they're family members.
It's messy.
Yeah. Okay. I want to quickly cover a little bit more about some of the differences in your 2 books, besides the cover photo.
Besides the cover. Yeah, we did some big updates. One of the things, and I want to point out is, and I think a lot of self-help books that were written in that era were riddled or peppered at the very least with toxic positivity.
Mm-hmm,
So I
mm-hmm.
took out anything that whiffed of that. Anytime I
Good.
said something like, your thoughts determine your reality, it was like, okay, let's back
Oh,
that
you're
a puppy
cute.
up. It was
Okay,
cute. It was a nice
little
sentiment.
Andrea. Uh-huh.
So I anywhere in there where I just added caveats, really. It's like, okay, so and then I think that this is a conversation that's happening more and more in self-help. It's like, yeah,
Mhm.
sometimes that's the case. And sometimes you just have anxiety and ADHD or autism, and I
Mhm.
think that the state of our mental health plays a big part in how we see certain tools and strategies and if they work for us or not. And I think that so much of our growth and evolution comes down to I just don't believe there's one thing. Like, it's not just talk therapy. It's not psychedelic therapy. It's not 12-step programs. It's the combination of all of those things. Like, what's your recipe? So that was a big point that I was trying to make in the updated version. And also in all of the chapters, I added, and this is something I did in my second and third book. I took a bunch of, because we're coaches at heart, it's like we're
Yeah,
curious,
right.
we ask lots of questions, and that's what I did. So at the end of each chapter, there's like half a dozen or so coaching questions where I ask the reader, like, how does this apply
Good.
to your life? What are your X, Y's, and Z's? And because I'm a big fan of doing the actual fucking work, like
Yes.
it's one thing to listen to podcasts like this and buy books and listen to audiobooks and all of these things. And it's great to have it between your ears. Like, I'd rather you have that than like your shitty self-talk. But also, in order to change your life, you have to change your life. Like, you have to
Mhm.
actually do the work. And
Right.
so getting curious is an excellent first step in there. I'm not asking people to like leave their marriages or, do these big grand things.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's just about getting curious. And so at the end of each chapter, that's what I invite people to do.
I love that. I love that. You and I agree on that, right? Listen to the podcasts. That's what we do.
Mhm.
Listen to my podcast, listen to Andrea's podcast, and read our books, and then do the work. Whether
And
that's
then do the
with
work. Yeah.
us or anybody else, do the
Mhm.
work, because it's not just enough to listen and read.
Yeah, I have a most amazing client earlier this year or last year. She had a binder of notes from all of the podcasts that she'd listened to, and she like pulls it out during the session. And I was like, oh my gosh.
Wow.
So her assignment, I coached her through it, and her assignment was to organize everything by
Mhm.
topic. And then she decided to take action on one thing a week from her binder. And like, she was cutting back on listening on the consumption of it and was like
Yes.
taking action on things that were super interesting to her. And then she would like go through and like take out stuff that just didn't matter to her anymore. And I was like, okay, that's doing the work.
There you
So if
go.
that's you, I mean, that's an option that you could do.
That's right. If you've been taking copious notes,
Mhm.
go back
If your
over
notes
them.
app looks like mine,
I love it. Andrea, where can everybody find you, buy all of your books, listen to your podcast, and all of the amazing things about Andrea Owen?
AndreaOwen.com/books is where my books are. And, they're available where books are sold. And then also my podcast is called Make Some Noise. And if anybody does it, if you go into I think most podcast searches, you can search the podcast, search Kate Anthony and yours. You've been on there many times. We've talked about lots of different things, not just
So
relationships. We've
true.
talked about body image. We've talked about
Oh my
aging.
God. I was thinking about that the other day.
We talked about rape culture, like lots
We
of
do. We do. We've got
on my show.
lots and lots of things. So make some noise. AndreaOwen.com. I love and adore you. And I'm so happy that you're almost done with this.
Almost done. I can smell the barn. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Divorce Survival Guide podcast. If you like what you hear, head on over to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen in and leave me a review. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram at the Divorce Survival Guide. I'll see you next time, and until then, remember, you, my love, deserve to be happy.